The next part of the exam is the lower extremities. We'll start this part of the exam with the patient lying down and finish the exam, mostly the neurologic part of this, with the patient sitting upright. So first, Mary, could you raise your gown a little bit? The first part of this, as always, is inspection. You can leave it down a little further. Yeah, that's fine. And what I'll do first is look at the legs, look at the feet, the toenails, look for any hair distribution, any changes in any moles, and then I'll check for edema. What I'll do with my hand is press fairly firmly on the front of the tibia here. Press hard enough so that I can see the whites of my nails here, and leaving my fingers there for at least a short period of time, releasing my fingers and then running my fingers across that area where I was pressing to find out whether there is any edema. And edema can be graded on a scale from 0, no edema, up to 4+. And I'll check it again then on the other side. Same thing, pressing fairly firmly with my fingers so that I can see the whites of my nails, leaving my fingers there for at least several seconds, and then releasing and moving my hand across the top here to find out whether there's any edema. Following the exam of the lower extremities looking for edema, the next part of this is to check pulses. And I'll start with femoral pulses, move to popliteal, then to dorsalis pedis and posterior tibialis pulses. So Mary, I'm going to check a pulse that's in your groin here, the femoral pulse. Okay. I wonder if you can lower your shorts just about to the top of your hips there. Okay. This is about where you'll find the pulse here. And again, with any pulse, you need to press fairly firmly against a solid structure in order to find the pulse. And with Mary's shorts lowered here, I'm going to approach this from the very top and press my fingers fairly deeply into the angle of the groin here. Now Mary, could you lower your shorts just a little bit more? Okay, not quite down. Okay, that's good. Now, this is just about at the top of the pubic hairline is where I'm pressing. Again, it'll take several pulse beats and I can feel a very strong femoral pulse. And if you can't feel the femoral pulse, you're likely not in the right place because this is fairly easy to find. So I'll check first on the right, then I'll use the same technique, pressing just at about the top of the pubic hairline, again pressing fairly deeply, allowing my fingers to sit there for a few moments. And if I can't feel the pulse, readjusting my fingers slightly until I can find it. All right, and I can feel the pulse very strong, 2 out of 4 pulsation there on the left side also. Now I'm going to listen to each of the femoral arteries for bruits, just as what we did on the neck and in the abdomen. Here we'll listen as well. So I'll again use the bell of my stethoscope, and I'll allow the bell to sit in that same location where I found the femoral pulse, allowing several heartbeats to pass. I shouldn't hear anything. I may hear bowel sounds, but no pulsating sounds. And then again over on the left side. The next pulse we'll check is the popliteal pulse. The best way to do this is using all 8 fingers of your hands, pressing into the popliteal fossa and allowing your thumbs to stabilize your fingers on the front here. What I'm doing is I'm pressing fairly firmly in the popliteal fossa until I feel a pulse, and it always takes several heartbeats to pass in order to feel the pulse. Then I'm going to compare that pulse to the other side, again lifting Mary's leg, letting her leg lie against my fingers, and you can use your thumbs to stabilize if you wish, and again pressing until I feel a good pulse there in the popliteal fossa, and then comparing the right and the left, that they feel about the same. Next I'll move to the foot pulses. The first one to check is the dorsalis pedis pulse here. The dorsalis pedis pulse is best identified by artificially drawing a triangle from the first and second toe up to a point here, and you'll find the pulse typically right in that region there. You don't always find it there and may need to readjust your fingers into another area, but if you start there, that's a fairly good place to start. Then I'll compare that pulse over to the left side, where again I'll artificially draw a triangle there, place my fingers in that area, and you notice I'm using several fingers because I'm more likely to find it if I'm pressing with several fingers. And if I wanted to then localize into where I feel the pulse with one digit, I can do that. And pulses, of course, are graded on a scale from 0 to 4, where 2 is the expected pulse that you'd find. The The next pulse to check, and on the right leg I'll check the posterior tibialis located behind the medial malleolus. You notice I have my fingers wrapped just behind the medial malleolus here, and again pressing the artery against the malleolus until I feel a very good pulse there. And then comparing again on the other side, same thing, wrapping my fingers just around the back of the medial malleolus and pressing fairly firmly there until I feel a pulse again. Now the next part that I'll check is range of motion of the lower extremities. I'll start with hip and knee and then move to ankle and foot. So most of this is active range of motion, and I'll ask the patient to move her leg around. So Mary, if you can flex your leg and bend your knee, there you go. So I see good knee flexion here and good hip flexion here. And now Mary, if you can rotate your foot this in that direction and this direction, and sometimes you have to help the patient with this just for directions and to find the full range of motion of the internal and external rotation. Now do the same thing on the other side. Bring your leg up, bring the leg here in this direction, which is external rotation of the hip, and this is internal rotation of the hip. And again, I see really good knee flexion, and there's knee extension there. Now the next motion I'll check is hip abduction and adduction. First, Mary, abduction, move your leg all the way out across as far as you can, and then all the way across your other leg. That's adduction. And then do the same thing on this side, abduction all the way out, and then bring your leg all the way across, adduction. And there's good range of motion there as well. Now I'll move down to the feet and the ankles for range of motion. So Mary, if you can first take your feet and point them up towards the ceiling and down towards the floor, and that is plantar flexion here, and the other was dorsiflexion. Now if you can rotate your soles of your feet in towards each other, there's inversion, and then rotate the soles of your feet out, there's eversion. Now that's mostly ankle, and then I'll move to toes. Can you curl your toes, Mary? And then can you point your toes up towards the ceiling? So there's extension of the toes and flexion of the toes. Now the remainder of the exam of lower extremities I'll conduct with the patient sitting upright, most of that being neurologic exam. All right, Mary, you can sit up here. So the lower extremity exam from this part is mostly neurologic exam, and we'll start first with the inspection, looking again at both legs, and Mary will move her gown up a little bit, thank you. Looking at legs for any involuntary movements, fasciculations, anything that is seen best when the patient's legs are relaxed. I'll also check bulk. What do the legs look like? Is there equal bulk to the musculature on both the right and the left side? And then following that, I'll check muscle tone. Again, like upper extremity, I want to just move the leg back and forth and see that it's nice and relaxed. I have my hand pressed against the tendons here on the back of the leg because I can sometimes feel if there's some catching or abnormal movement of those tendons. I'll check again on the left side. So there's increased tone or there's flaccid tone. Flaccid tone is what you would see with someone who has paralysis of lower extremities. And this is normal tone. I can easily move the leg back and forth without any stoppage of that motion. Next, I'll check strength. And again, strength is best checked when the muscle is at its best point of contraction. So I'm going to have Mary first lift up this leg a little bit off the table here and hold it there, and I'm going to press down against the leg, and this is checking the quadriceps musculature. So I'm going to press down, you keep the leg up there. All right, now you can rest that down and lift this leg up, keep that up a little higher than that, and I'll press down against this leg, and I can see again that there's good strength with the quadriceps muscles there. Then I need to just check extension at the knee. The extension at the knee will check the next nerve root, so push out against my hand here, and then push out against my hand here. And you can brace yourself against the table, push out again, to make sure that the patient is not pushing you away too far. Now for the feet, I'll check both dorsiflexion and plantar flexion, and I can check these easily both at the same time because a patient can really use both muscles easily at the same time. So press up against my fingers here, and then press down against my fingers there. So that is dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. So I've screened the various muscle groups that help me to say that each of the nerve roots are intact. Now next I'll check the superficial sensory exam. As a screening exam, all I want to know here is that Mary has sensation in both of her feet and it is equal. So Mary, can you close your eyes for me and tell me if you feel me touch here?
Yes.
And is that the same on both sides?
Same.
All right, and is there any change in that from what it normally is for you? No.
No.
All right. So that's the only part that you need to do for screening. There's more advanced somatosensory testing that we'll do with the more advanced neurologic exam. So the next part of the lower extremity is coordination, and this is called the heel to shin test. Mary, can you take the heel of this foot and run it up and down the shin of this leg? So I'm watching as she goes up and down to see that there's fairly smooth motion in both directions. Now if you can repeat on the other side, again to see is there fairly smooth motion. As a test of coordination and strength, it helps to test the cerebellar functions. Then after I do that, I'll next move to reflexes. And the first reflex that I'll check is the patellar tendon reflex. That I'll identify by finding the patellar tendon just below the kneecap, and I'll, with her knee just resting, I'll strike that with my reflex hammer, and I'm watching the leg come out from below. You can also sometimes see contraction of the muscle up here, but usually it's pretty obvious that there is contraction here of the, or extension of the leg. Then once I've checked that side, I'll move here, again identifying the tendon, placing my reflex hammer across the top and again tapping it, and I will compare one side to the other again to make sure that they are symmetrical. Reflexes are graded on a 0 to 4 scale. 2 out of 4 is the expected amount of response. I'm going to check the Achilles tendon reflex next. What I'll do is slightly dorsiflex the foot, and I'm going to tap here on the Achilles tendon, and then I'm going to watch a response in the foot here. And for purposes of the camera, I'll switch to the other side. I'm going to tap the Achilles tendon, and then I'm going to see a little bit of a fluctuation of the foot, a little plantar flexion of the foot. Then I'll check the Achilles tendon reflex on the other side, again just slightly dorsiflexing the foot, tapping on the Achilles tendon here with my reflex hammer, and again seeing a slight plantar flexion of the foot. Next, I'll check the plantar reflex of the foot. I'll pull the foot out a little bit, and then using the handle of the reflex hammer as a slightly uncomfortable stimulus to the bottom of the foot. I'll start at the heel, run across the outside of the foot, and curl in under the metatarsal phalangeal joints. You notice how the toes curl down. That's a normal response here. The big toe is the most important one, but you also see that there's some curling down of the other toes across like this, and then down and underneath, and curling down of the toes. An abnormal response is if the toes go up instead of down, and that's called the Babinski response to this reflex. But normal is for the toes to flex down. Now I'll move to the other foot, pulling the foot out again, using the reflex hammer again, across on the feet, and then the toes curl down just a little bit. I'll repeat that one more time. Across and under the foot, and toes curl down just a little bit, the normal response. All right, the next part of the exam is gait. I'm going to watch Mary walk in a number of different ways. First, can you walk just normally across the floor to the door, and then when you get to the door, turn around and come back. I'm watching her stride, watching her arms swing, watching as she turns and goes back to see how many steps she needs to take to turn around. And then as she, now you can stop there, Mary. Now if you can walk on your toes and come across walking on your toes, again watching some of the same things. Is she able to balance? Is there strength enough in both legs to be able to walk on toes? Now you can stop here and walk on your heels. So she'll lift up the front of her feet and walk across the floor this way, again watching. Now you can stop again and walk tandem gait, which is tightrope walking. Put one foot just in front of the other and walk across this way. I'm watching balance, and again how she is able to put her feet in front of each other as she walks across the floor this way. Okay, thank you, Mary. The last part of the exam here is the Romberg test, which is part of testing Mary's ability to balance as well as sensory and cerebellar exam. So Mary, could I ask you to put your feet together and put your hands at your side here and stand up nice and straight. And then I'm going to hold my hand here in front and behind you, and I want you to close your eyes. And while Mary's standing there, I'm checking to see, although everybody has a little bit of wobbliness while they're standing, checking to make sure that she can stand in this position for about 20 to 30 seconds or so. And this is a exam that you want to keep your hands in front and behind during this part so that she does not fall. Okay, thank you, Mary. Now you can stand where you're comfortably.